Hello, good day. I'm Kenneth Barrientos. I'm Program Officer at UNESCO UNEVOC, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to share in this event. I'm joining this conversation in my capacity as coordinator of our UNESCO UNEVOC's program area called ESD and Greening TVET. And my intervention is intended to share information and knowledge regarding green skills and how UNESCO UNEVOC is mobilizing efforts to put this important topic on the agenda of TVET, at least with the stakeholders that we work with, and to also create opportunities for mutual support. Now, Greening TVET is a flagship program within UNESCO UNEVOC in an effort to build capacity and create synergies between education approaches and climate change action. Now, what we are learning is that the education and training systems struggle to cope with the issues of unemployment and align skills development approaches with rapidly transitioning economies and societies. Almost all countries are in their journey to transition to a more integrated development. The SDGs is, of course, an important driver of transition that we are seeing today. And we are very happy that we have this agenda to talk about an integrated development agenda for all. However, making transition and doing it effectively in ways that can address social, economic, and environmental issues are, of course, two different things. And this input, I hope, could help share some insights into how TVET can drive this transition and thereby contribute to SDGs. Before I go into details, allow me to introduce UNESCO UNEVOC and how we work, who we work with, especially for those who are not very familiar with our work. UNESCO UNEVOC is UNESCO's specialized agency for Tibet, and we are based in Bonn, Germany. And for the coming 3 years, we are starting the year 2021 with a vision, which is to promote a future-oriented Tibet that is responsive to sustainable development and labor market demands. A key part of our work is to mobilize a network of Tibet institutions in over 180 countries. So, what we do is we engage with them to facilitate, among others, institutional processes that could allow a smooth transition to green economy and society. Facilitating this transition is one of the three priority areas in the current strategy of Tibet in UNESCO. Now, this may sound easier said than done, and this is true. For this reason, working in synergy with the UNEVOC centers through their institutional leaders, teachers and trainers, youth, and the community that they work with is critical for us. And for those not yet familiar with UNEVOC centers, so these are institutions that are established in the different countries under ministries, and they are comprised of the different types of institutions. For example, we work with ministries, with national bodies, with training providers, research centers, and universities in all regions of the world, including, of course, in Africa. And what you can see in this slide are the places where we have active UNEVOC centers, and they are supporting us in implementing the strategy for Tibet of UNESCO. So the pink dotted spots are the UNEVOC centers, and the blue dotted spots are where we have our cluster coordinating centers, which are basically institutions that help us coordinate at the sub-regional and regional levels. So UNESCO UNEVOC works with these centers to help transform Tibet. Um, so how does this transformation look like, and how do we facilitate it? So, under the current strategy of UNESCO UNEVOC, we are focusing on four lines of action. So, they are policy coordination, where we work with some other agencies like the ILO, the Asian Development Bank, CDFOP, the European Training Foundation, the European Commission. So this is where we try to coordinate different policy strategies, and we coordinate our work a little bit better, so we don't duplicate what is already ongoing, and rather we try to complement the different works of the different development agencies that deal with TVET and green skills. We also do capacity development, so we are supporting leaders and managers through targeted training programs. We conduct thematic activities, we conduct workshops and seminars to address the needs and the interests of the teaching staff, some policymakers, and also other players of TVET like standard setters and others. We develop resources, so we try to work with different institutions, the UNEVOC centers, and also some individual experts to help us generate this new knowledge that we could further transform into useful resource materials that we disseminate to the different stakeholders that we work with. So we do some implementation resource guides, some online training modules, and analytical studies. And this kind of work will continue as we see the evolution of the work on greening TVET and green skills in the transition to the green economy. Now, UNESCO places an emphasis on the importance of TVET to achieve economic and social outcomes. And increasingly, the role of TVET in contributing to ecological outcomes has been emphasized. However, this task is faced with issues. So we all know it. It's perhaps good to unpack in the context of this conversation what these issues surrounding green skills are all about. The sector has a complex setup in many countries, so we have seen that firsthand. TVET is really quite complicated, and we cannot emphasize enough that TVET, with all its complexity, involves multiple stakeholders and institutions that need to work together to create an effective and relevant system, and also implementation mechanisms. And in the table that you can see, I'm trying to make a simple illustration, if not an oversimplification of that problem. So here you can see different stakeholders from different sectors have a purview over TVET. They have different role to play in greening TVET and skills. So now we want to narrow down the topic a little bit. Now, the main issue is that there is still a wide fragmentation of education and climate policy action at the ministerial levels, and this is creating additional complexity to the whole issue of greening TVET. A case in point is our own work here at UNESCO and UNESCO UNEVOC, whereby across the different types of stakeholders that we work with, our work seems to have closer alignment with the actors that have a focus on the economic and social aspects of country development. So you have the ministries of labor, ministries of education, and so on and so forth. We have also development organizations working at the country level that deal with issues of education, skills development, TVET, those who are working in the informal sector, and other providers of training. So, while those who still consider climate change as a purely environmental issue, we can see that the interactions that they have are taking more often with agencies that deal with environmental concerns. And these lines of authority that we traditionally are defined. So if we are working with education sector, we are working with education community, and sometimes they don't deal quite flexibly in other sectors. And this is where the fragmentation begins. As we see, this mirrors the experience at the country level when it comes to this kind of fragmentation. So, fortunately, there are efforts to address this through interagency coordination, which, as I have mentioned earlier, is also happening at the highest level, although, of course, there are a lot of room for improvement. So, recently, we have undertaken a review and analysis of the climate change action plan. So this is one of the works that we are doing here at UNESCO UNEVOC, where we try to understand the observable gaps between national climate ambitions and their plan for implementation. And we are talking here at the country level. So why this kind of work is necessary, you may ask? It is for us to better understand where TVET and skills development are considered as key to achieve the different plans of action to combat climate change. And we try to do this, of course, with the idea that there are established tools that are quite known at the country level, of course, education, training, and public awareness. Now, there are three reflections that we could draw from this study that we have done recently, and I'm sharing that in the slide. Firstly, there's an issue of linking plans of action with skills development strategies. And I think this is quite common in many countries that were reviewed. Secondly, some countries seem to have integrated their adaptation planning into specific skill sectors, which is, of course, a good thing. For example, some countries have adaptation plans linked with water policy, like in Zimbabwe. The agricultural strategies in Bangladesh are also, in a way, their strategy to address climate issues. The energy strategy in Jamaica is also integrating the climate action plans, and they have identified renewable energy as a centerpiece of the climate ambition in this small island. And these kind of examples are giving us some impulse as to how different countries are strategizing the achievement of their climate ambitions, and how best they could work around the different sectorial specific focus that they have, but at the same time not leave out the important aspects of charting the targets and ambitions that they have to cut down on their emissions, for example. So third reflection we have from this study is that although the global community has advanced well in conceptualizing solutions to adapt to green transitions, some countries are struggling to define or even contextualize the needs of green economies in terms of skills, although in most cases it is easy for them to set the goal for where they want to go. So what these reflections are telling us is that they mirror what we are just saying earlier, where we see fragmentations exist at the highest level of policy work and actions. And this fragmentation is also translated at the very institutional level that we often see as teachers, as institution leaders. So this leaves institutions with limited scope to deal with the issues at hand, and let alone frame their skills response to shortages and gaps in a more systematic and sustainable manner. Now, still on issue number 2, education and training mirroring the ongoing fragmentation. We know that a good way to consider when addressing these first 2 issues that we have been discussing is to find out an approach to sustainability where social economic systems are directly connected and often emerge out of ecological systems. And this illustration that you can see in the side, tries to pay attention to the linkage between environment, society, and economy and how they fit together. I'm not quite sure where we sourced this, but this is an important and very powerful illustration. So I decided to include in my slide deck. So this is also giving us or reminding us that we are fortunate enough that the SDGs or the 2030 agenda is giving us a very good framework for an integrated development. And the transition to greener economies and societies and the discussion around embedding sustainability in curriculum and training. So all these we believe are driven by the global agendas that we have currently in place, which are the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. But it's important to note that all this will not matter if we are not able to fit them together. And so the role of the people on the ground who can really help um, 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 fit help facilitate the integration of all these issues together and to have a better appreciation of how they could all work in one stroke is very important. So when we try to understand the issues of fragmentation, I thought about sharing with you the fact that the solutions that come to mind, to our mind, could bring another complex layer of issues, which is capacity development. And I am sharing this quotation because I thought it has nicely summed up what we're trying to say here. That it's not enough to make an estimation of numbers where skills gap exists, but also to strengthen the capacities to deliver strategies. So fragmentation, capacity building, all these can work together, and this might be the only way to see some transformational change. Now, the third issue that I have included in my input is that the specific challenges that the institutions are faced with come in many folds. And at UNESCO UNEVOC, I could say that we have been seeing this kind of issues with, in our conversations and interactions with the different centers and institutions that we work with. And we have been implementing, for example, one project that seeks to understand the issues around greening TVET. So this project is called the Bridging Innovation Innovation and Learning for TVET. And the main purpose is to learn and compile the different new competencies and qualifications that are required in a green and digital types of jobs, and also create opportunities to learn how countries are modernizing their curricula and how they are adopting the new competencies in their existing frameworks. So basically, this project is facilitated with the European UNEVOC centers, but the end goal is to also share and be able to bridge their experiences in Europe, and by experiences I mean TVET experiences in Europe, to other countries and other regions of the world, specifically Asia and Africa. And of course, vice versa, the European partners in this project are also very much interested in understanding what's happening in Asia and Africa. So in one of the workshops that we have conducted within the framework of this project, it has become apparent that as much as TVET systems are advanced and modernized in some countries in Europe, institutions are facing issues, the same issues like integrating meeting new green skills demands, making institutions greener, understanding how competencies need to be green, and so on. And this is very much, this resonates the challenges and the issues that are also faced in other TVET institutions in other countries. So just by way of example, within the context of this project, in countries like Germany, there are existing curricular frameworks that exist according to the different states. So Germany is of course, is comprised of different landers or states, and each state would have their own education strategies or policies in place. Specific to Tibet, vocational training colleges are increasingly expected to meet the skills needs in the labor market, while also trying to respect existing curricular frameworks. So some countries in Europe mentioned that one of their biggest challenge is to achieve the basic foundations to become a green training institution, because not all of them definitely has this kind of character, and it's for them to start now is quite challenging, but nevertheless many are also quite interested to be part of this journey. So why they find this difficult is because there are observed capacity gaps among the teachers, among the trainers. So many of these institutions are saying that it's very difficult to achieve, to become a green TVET institution without these important foundations. But on the other hand, there are also challenges that are easier for them to cope with. And I think the very good structures of their TVET systems are helping them to navigate through these challenges. Another challenge is identifying and integrating green skills and competencies. So some of the institutions that we work with are not very familiar with the types of competencies and the green skills that must be adopted in vocational training, and of course this requires a lot of time to understand, and also making available some resources so they are accessible across different learning venues, especially in some countries where, as we know, the dual training track is implemented. So it's also quite a challenge for some. So while others have difficulties also to sustain green transformation in view of some resource constraints. So as I said, these challenges are somewhat common across many regions, not only in Europe, but lucky for us, because what we are seeing is also giving us a very detailed understanding of what these challenges look like and how different institutions are trying to cope with different issues and different degrees of solutions they are trying to adopt. So for this reason, peer learning and networking has become much more relevant than ever to make accessible the tools and the experiences that could help deal with the issues around greening TVET and skills. As we know, they also evolve. No? In the spirit of sharing, so we are here in the context of learning from peers. So in the spirit of sharing and experience, sharing the experiences in some country contexts. So Dr. Ramsarup asked me to share some examples in some countries in which we have strong cooperation with UNEVOC centers. And here in this slide, I have tried to put together an example from India. So India, as you know, is one of those countries that align their green jobs and skills development with a national goal. So in India, there is this national goal that they want to achieve, which is to skill India by 2022, and they have identified a certain number of the skilled are going to be skilled by then. And now we know that it is not too far horizon. It's now 2020, and perhaps it would be interesting to know how they have progressed. But what I'm trying to share here as an example is how India is taking up the issue of developing green skills and how systematically they are trying to model this process to contribute and to make sure that among the Indians that are going to be skilled, there will be sufficient or adequate number of green skilled people in the country to support the different jobs that are available in the country. So we are seeing in this example an initiative that has received the support of the Ministry of Skills Development and is led by an agency called the National Skills Development Corporation. So why I'm using this example, because NSDC, or the National Skills Development Corporation, is a UNEVOC center. And I thought it's nice to bring in the experience of one of our members in the network. So together with the Ministry of Skills Development, NSDC has established this initiative to create large and good quality vocational training institutions. So they've been supporting these training institutions, and in this effort, they also target to enable the sustainability of support systems that are available for these institutions and to establish the participation of industry-led sector skills council. So now India is also very well known for its sector skills council. So they have really developed this private sector-led support in the country. And now this sector skills council is one of the ways by which they have adopted to engage actors that are relevant to specific sectors. So to inform the processes and the input in the education and training institutions. So there's a very good cooperation that are extended by the Sector Skills Council. So what they do is to identify and address the green skills needs through the Sector Skills Council for Green Jobs, which is an industry-led body dedicated to this area and is, of course, most relevant. So Sector Skills Council for Green Jobs is just one among the many sector skills councils in India. With the aim to increase capacity of vocational institutions for green jobs, the Skills Council for Green Jobs has a role to oversee the systematic approach to designing and delivering training based on a robust data on skills gaps. And as you can see in the slide, the key steps are enumerated. So there are three things to note in this example, which to me seems to be working well and in accordance to how TVET systems should operate. So first is stakeholder partners and engagement. In this case, the private sector is very important. If a country is set to really implement a systematic approach that is also very relevant for the labor market. So there really needs the chance to work with people who are much more acquainted with the developments and the changes that are taking place in the employment sector. Second thing to note is that strong policy framework drives the capacitation of institutions. So this is an example of in India where the very establishment of a private-led corporation, which is the NSDC, and them also enabling the active cooperation of the Sector Skills Council. This is giving us a picture of a very strong policy frameworks that are there and are intended to support the capacity and to sustain the support systems that are available and that can be tapped into by the different training institutions in the country. Then third thing to point to note is that the systematic design that support training providers to deliver. So as you can see, they have all these processes that are in place where there is a role for industries to play in the process, in the development of the qualification packs and the national occupational standards, in the accrediting of institutions, and in the assessment and certification of candidates. So all these are have been thought through to become a part of the process where the training design and implementation framework could support the development of green skills in India. Next example, so in further scanning the examples from the network for the purposes of this conversation, I came across this example of a roadmap that has been developed for the construction ecosystem in one of the leading provinces in Canada. And this roadmap has become a very important tool used by this agency called Association of Canadian Colleges and Institutions in Canada to understand the changes in training sector and how TVET and other training providers like the Canadian colleges and institutions, how they can play a critical role in providing the skilled workforce in the construction trade. So to illustrate this example, in the province of Ontario, Canada, the local authority has attempted to set a roadmap to address the specific needs in the energy efficient, low carbon, and high performing building in the construction trade. So, as we all know, this trade concerns different aspects or tasks like lighting, water, heating, air quality, cooling, window systems, automation, design, and the overall construction. So, all these job tasks have potential to be green, of course. And the trade also relies on tradespeople and professionals like engineers, architects, technicians, plumbers, bricklayers, electricians, masons, as well as inspectors, operators. So this is just to give, of course, the picture of how complex the different tasks and the different profiles are in this sector. So in this example, CCAN, the Association for Canadian Colleges and Institute, has shared in one of our workshops in India some interesting observations about this. And they said that there were observable gaps in unlikely elements of training. So when we talk about the roadmap, before they could organize and put together a roadmap, there was a need for them to analyze and to see where the skill issues are. And in this process, they have observed the gaps of this where there is missing and lacking. And so according to SICAN, there are critical gaps that need to be addressed in developing soft skills and other technical skills among the skilled personnel that are typically employed in this sector. So when we talk about soft skills, so these are communication, interdependency of tasks, and among technical skills, ability to execute tasks, the anticipation of how much time is required to complete projects with green components, the holistic and systems view of the trade, and the skills upgrade system. So all these were analyzed in the course of developing this roadmap, and perhaps it has also been observed when they were already trying to pilot this roadmap. So why this is important to note is that the roadmap is giving us an interesting angle to training skilled people for green jobs. No, so the increasing tendencies of greening the construction industry is demanding competencies and changes in the training that were not foreseen as critical before, especially for people engaged in trades and vocational occupations. So one of these important and critical area that needs to be included is what they call the green literacy. And we are talking about green literacy as the possession of an ecological mindset of those people that acquire them, and also um, um, those who are working in this whole ecosystem of jobs that have been green. So the roadmap suggests that there are also areas where training can leverage in new opportunities and consider new approaches to meet new types of challenges. So apart from acquiring the basic green literacy, the modes of training is also expected to be modified to incorporate competence areas such as low carbon skills in education, continuing education credentials, apprenticeship places, cross-disciplinary content of curricula in multiple trades, the use of different media. So all these different competencies are very much required in order to deliver and develop green skills and green mindsets. Another area to pay attention to when we talk about changes in the training, as has been observed in Canada, is that there is a need to develop competencies that could lead to adapt training approaches to market infrastructure. So by this, we mean incorporating system-wide view of work, the whole systems approach rather than separation of functions, and some common soft skills like communication, collaboration, quality assurance, etc. So lastly, the roadmap emphasizes the need for incentives in the form of additional certification, specialized in low carbon skills or additional programs to complement the approach for embedded skills or research. So again, this example gives a range of areas to improve when we talk about preparing the workforce for green jobs and adopting green skills. So there are a lot of things to consider. And the cases of India and Canada are just some of the few examples where we can see extensive amount of procedure that were employed to be able to come up with some solutions, both systemic or training oriented. So, but it remains that the fact remains that the challenge is to develop competence areas that are needed to meet the demands of a very old traditional trade, in the case of Canada, like the construction trade, and that now must adapt to the new opportunities and challenges of the profession. So I'm almost done with my slides. I just have a couple of slides remaining. And in this, so after giving you examples and after sharing with you what we have been observing in the different projects and in the different interactions that we have. So UNESCO UNEVOC is actively developing resources that can be useful for the stakeholders and for the larger, for the wider TVET community. If you wish to get to know more about our work here at UNESCO and at the UNESCO UNEVOC International Center. So I understand that many of you are actively working on ESD. So some of you may be already familiar with some of the UNESCO publications that I'm sharing in these slides. So recently, two important publications. So you can find them the first two to the left. So ESD learning objectives, and there's one guidebook on excuse me, education for sustainable development for educators, which might be very interesting for you. So, moreover, we have also been actively publishing knowledge resources and guidance documents at UNESCO UNEVOC. So, between 2017 to up to present, 2020, we have organized tools and resources for use of institutions, leaders, and teachers to guide them and expand their knowledge. So, very soon, we will also be completing a work that we have conducted with NSTC in India and Dr. Ramsarup and other colleagues. So we hope that this new resource, which you can find, it's not yet laid out, but we have been working on finalizing the manuscript. So you can see the on the far right hand side, this implementation resource is something that we hope could support many in gaining insights into greening curricula and training. So you can see the third publication, Greening Technical and Vocational Education and Training, a guide for institutions. So this has been so far one of the most sought after guidance reference that we have developed, and it is available in English, French, and Spanish. And this guide provides an overall framework for considering the greening of Tibet, and it answers the question why we must invest in greening Tibet, what are the different approaches, what are the processes involved when we organize this at the in an institutional setting. As a whole institutional approach, what would be the potential or the possible outcomes if we implement it. So this provides a very rich resource that I hope you all could see. And other resources we have developed, Advancing Green Human Capital. This is more of a policy-oriented resource we have developed with other agencies like the ILO, the French agencies, and this provides some policy guidance for green skills development. And the third, skills development for renewable energy and energy efficient jobs, is the latest of the series that we have been producing to support some skills, sector-oriented resource materials. So this focuses on what are the imperatives for developing skills in the renewable energy, especially in the solar energy area. The cover that you will find at the bottom is actually linked to our Greening TVET guide. So there is this facilitators guide for Greening TVET developed under the auspices of a UNESCO European project in Malawi, and they have used the Greening guide to translate in the context of Malawi, how they can support leaders, facilitators, and trainers to expand their work in Greening TVET. And you can find all other materials in the UNESCO Digital Library and the UNESCO online publications, and I hope you will find them useful.